Relics should not complicate clean equations. Admiral Vethrix of the Elegant Council regarded the tactical display with detached satisfaction. Blue icons bloomed in disciplined arcs. Gold command glyphs pulsed at the center. At the edge of the A projection drifted a single, ungainly human vessel, long, blunt, inefficient. Its transponder repeated the same message in 12 Council-recognized languages. Medical registry, non-combatant, evacuation in progress. Vethrix allowed a thin curl of amusement to touch his mandibles. Humans still believed markings mattered. Confirm. Classification, he said, already knowing the answer. Terran hospital ship, a subordinate replied. Capacity estimates, 20,000 biologicals. Heat signatures indicate cryobays and surgical arrays. No weapon ports detected. A pause followed, the kind junior officers expected to precede mercy. Instead, Vethrix adjusted the fleet's formation by 0.3 degrees and spoke with administrative calm. Processing authorized. Primitive sentimentality delays the inevitable. The Council's doctrine was clear. Species that clung to obsolete war ethics became liabilities. Humans were a solved problem. Kinetic throwers, layered metals, emotional decision-making. Relics from a slower age. The hospital ship's presence merely simplified logistics. Remove it, and the surrounding human escorts would scatter to recover. Survivors, predictable, efficient. Energy lances to minimal yield, Vethrix ordered. No need to waste charge. Across the formation, 10,000 Council vessels aligned. Capacitors charged in synchronized silence. Distance closed to 42,000 kilometers, well beyond any plausible human retaliation envelope. Timers counted down from 90 seconds. Vethrix watched them tick with professional pleasure. A relic species, insisting on relic protections. On the display, the human ship did not maneuver. It did not power weapons. It continued broadcasting evacuation codes, timestamps updating every 6 seconds. The numbers irritated Vethrix more than the message itself. Humans always quantified suffering, as if accounting could elevate them. Fire, he said. Light crossed the void. Coherent energy struck the hospital ship's forward shields in a disciplined fan. The Council's weapons were precise, elegant, optimized through 5 centuries of iteration. Vethrix expected the usual bloom of catastrophic failure within 3 seconds. Nothing happened. The energy dispersed, flattening against an unseen field, bleeding off into harmless scatter. Readouts flickered. Damage indicators remained dark. Shield integrity held. A junior officer spoke before remembering himself. Admiral, absorption is reading at... Repeat the volley, Vethrix snapped. Increase yield to standard. Suppression. A second wave struck. Then a third. Sensors recalibrated. Algorithms rewrote themselves in real time, chasing an answer that refused to exist. The human ship remained intact, its broadcasts uninterrupted. Evacuation count ticked. Upward. In 20,004,112. 20,004,118. This was not expected. Log anomaly, Vethrix said, voice flat. Continue processing. But irritation crept in, cold and unwelcome. The relic was not behaving like a relic. On the edge of the display, human escorts began to shift. 67 warships, previously idle, adjusted orientation by fractions of a degree. Drives warmed. Vethrix noted it with mild contempt. Late reactions were a human hallmark. Processing does not fail. It adapts. He straightened, folding his manipulators behind his back as the tactical map refreshed. Whatever this delay represented, it would be corrected. The Council had erased louder protests than this, and with fewer ships. Behind the numbers, however, something unsettled the room, a silence, where confirmation should have been. The hospital ship still lived, the humans still counted, and for the first time, processing was taking longer than planned. This is a medical vessel. The transmission cut through the Council's command band without distortion, clear and unhurried. Admiral Vethrix felt the irritation sharpen. Human signals were usually cluttered, emotion leaking into syntax, redundancies stacked like prayers. This one was clean. Elegant Council fleet, the voice continued, neutral, human, unmodulated. You are firing on a registered hospital ship under interstellar medical law. Timestamp 0741 standard. This transmission is being recorded. Vethrix made no effort to hide his disdain. They think words are armor, he said quietly. The tactical display overlaid legal identifiers as the human signal pushed authenticated codes into the Council's system. Registry numbers matched, medical insignia verified, evacuation corridors flagged in civilian white. The ship's internal feeds followed, rows of cryopods, surgical bays in motion, children strapped into acceleration cradles. No weapons, no deception. Cease fire, the human voice said, not as a plea, but a notice. You are in violation of 12 Accords. We are transmitting casualty risk projections now. Numbers appeared, not arguments, not outrage. Numbers projected civilian casualties at current fire rate 3,200 per second. Shield saturation margin unknown. Evacuation completion estimate 6 hours, 12 minutes. Current evac count 20,641. The counter ticked upward every 6 seconds. Vethrix watched it with a tightening mandible. Humans always believed documentation changed outcomes. The Council had burned archives older than their species. Continue firing, he ordered. They are stalling. Another volley struck the shields. Again dispersion. Again no breach. Energy efficiency graphs updated against expectation, red lines flattening where they should have spiked. A subordinate cleared his throat. Admiral, the human escorts are powering main drives. Velocity increase detected. Range closing at... Irrelevant, Vethrix cut in. The hospital ship is the leverage. Finish it. The human transmission did not change tone. We are not returning fire, the voice said. We are documenting. Intent. Timestamp 0743. Second recorded volley. A pause, precisely 1 second long. Evacuation continues. This was not defiance. It was procedure. A second channel opened, broader, routed through civilian relays and neutral observers. The same message repeated, now tagged for external receipt. Vethrix recognized the maneuver too late. Humans were not arguing with him. They were building a record. On screen, observer markers began to appear. Distant systems, trade hubs, neutral monitors, 47 and counting. The counter climbed, 20,000 and 9,002. Terminate the broadcast, Vethrix snapped. Unable, and officer replied. Signal redundancy detected across multiple bands. They anticipated jamming. Of course they did. The human voice spoke again, quieter somehow, though the volume did not change. For clarity, it said. This vessel carries no combatants, no command staff, only civilians and medical personnel. We will not maneuver to shield our escorts. We will not escalate. Then, the line that settled into the room like cold. Metal. If you continue, you will own this. Processing was supposed to be simple, yet every second added weight. To the numbers, to the record, to the watching galaxy. The hospital ship held position, shield steady, evacuation clock running. Behind it, 67 human warships finished warming their drives. The humans were done speaking. Their fire should have erased the problem. Admiral Vethrix watched the command timers reset with crisp precision. Capacitors cycled, emitters aligned. This volley would not be minimal yield. This would be corrective. Council doctrine allowed escalation when processing encountered resistance. And resistance, however, absurd was now measurable. Full spectrum discharge, he ordered. All forward lances. Maintain range at 40,000 kilometers. 10,000 ships answered as one. Energy bled into space. Layered frequencies braided to overwhelm any known defense. The tactical display brightened, then steadied, then hesitated. The Yitro human hospital ship did not break. Light struck its shields and flattened, smeared into a wide aurora that rolled along an invisible curve. Sensors struggled, recalibrated, struggled again. The energy did not rebound. It did not refract dangerously. It simply went nowhere. An officer swallowed. Impact registered! Absorption confirmed! Quantify, Vethrix said. Initial read. 98.7% absorbed. Residual scatter vented harmlessly. Shield integrity holding at 99.4. Silence followed, not the anticipatory kind. The wrong kind. Impossible. Council weapons were not blunt instruments. They were designed to punch through civilizations that had survived stars, dying. No relic alloy should do this. No kinetic-brained species should have solved field harmonics this cleanly. Repeat, Vethric said. Another barrage. Higher yield, longer duration. 90 seconds of sustained fire that would have gutted a fortress world. The shields brightened. The glow deepened. The absorption curve flattened further. Updated efficiency, the officer said, voice tight. 99.1%, they're adapting. A stinger line flashed unbidden through Vethrix's thoughts. The fire had nowhere to go. On the secondary display, the human transmission continued to log events with clinical precision. Timestamp 0747. Fourth volley recorded. Energy yield logged. Civilian evacuation count 20,000, 12,184. The counter did not care about doctrine. Vethrix felt something unfamiliar crawl along his neural ridge. Not fear. Irritation sharpened into concern. Concern threatened calculation. Shift frequencies, he snapped. Randomize phase variance. Break their pattern recognition. The barrage changed character. Harder, uglier, less elegant. The council prided itself on beauty and destruction. This was necessity. The result was the same. Absorption rates dipped for half a second, then recovered. 98.9. 99 even. Is compensated, another officer cut in, forgetting protocol. They're shedding external plating, jettisoning non-essential mass in sequence. It's deliberate. The display confirmed it. Human ships peeled layers away as they burned. Forward. Shedding armor panels that would have crippled council vessels if mishandled. Each discard was timed, clean, planned long before this moment. They had practiced this. Reform outer rings, Vethrix ordered. Maintain distance, spread, make them thin. The council fleet shifted, elegant arcs widening as doctrine demanded. Formation collapse was a risk only when an enemy could force proximity. Humans should not have been able to do that. They did anyway. Closing velocity compressed space. 40,000 kilometers became 30, then 25. Timers rewrote themselves. Engagement windows shrank from minutes to seconds. The human ships did not weave. They did not feint. They came straight in, vectors locked, trusting speed like a law of nature. A standalone line flashed across the tactical overlay. They are inside the envelope. Adjust firing solutions, Vethrix snapped. Predictive targeting, lead for relativistic, drift. The Council's weapons recalculated, but geometry betrayed them. At these velocities, micro-adjustments mattered. Human ships exploited that gap with brutal simplicity. They did not dodge. They timed. Missiles launched, not swarms. Not chaos, precision spreads. Each missile rode the turbulence of its predecessor, shaving milliseconds off interception windows. Council point defenses engaged, but the math was wrong now. Too many vectors, too little time. Formation integrity degrading, an officer reported. Outer ring slipping by 3%, inner ring compensating late. 3% became 6. Human ships knifed through gaps that should not have existed. They passed so close that Council sensors registered hull shadows, mass eclipsing mass at closing speeds that should have torn ships apart. The humans held it. Distance to hospital ship? Vethrix demanded. Human escorts crossing defensive. Perimeter, came the reply. They're interposing. The irony burned. The relics were shielding the hospital ship with warships moving faster than Council strikecraft. Evacuation counter continued to tick. 20,000, 18,993. Focus on the escorts, Vethrix ordered. Break their momentum. Energy lances tracked, fired, and missed. Not wildly, narrowly. Human ships adjusted by fractions of a degree at precisely the wrong moments for Council algorithms. They weren't outmaneuvering the fire. They were outrunning the predictions. Another stinger line struck the bridge like a verdict. Speed is a weapon. Council formations lost their elegance. Rings warped. Spacing collapsed. Ships adjusted independently, each correction compounding the yaw next. Doctrine demanded cohesion. Reality punished it. At 20,000 kilometers, human fleets throttled down. Not because they had to, because they had arrived. Their formation snapped tight, 67 ships locking into a geometry Vethrix. Did not recognize, dense, layered, brutal. No wasted space. No hesitation. Behind them, the hospital ship remained steady, shields unwavering, evacuation clock running. Ahead of them, the Council fleet drifted out of alignment, its greatest advantage spent. Vethrix understood then, with cold clarity, that the humans had not rushed the distance. They had measured it, and now, at last, they were close enough to begin. The first human shot was silent. No bloom, no warning flare. Just a line on the display that existed for less than a heartbeat before it punched through a Council cruiser's forward hull. Sensors lagged reality by 0.4 seconds. By the time the breach alarm sounded, the ship was already dead. Impact, an officer whispered. Kinetic. Mass estimate, 12 metric tons. Vethrix stared as the cruiser split along a clean axis, internal decks venting into space. There was no explosion. Just catastrophic structural failure as momentum finished the work. Energy could not. Rail guns. Relics, they had called them. Time to next discharge? Vethrix demanded. 3 seconds, came the reply. Across all human platforms. 3 seconds was an eternity and an instant all at once. The second volley followed before the Council fleet could realign. Slugs crossed the gap at relativistic speed, trajectories plotted not for shields but for mass shadows, engines, spines, command cores. Armor meant nothing when the weapon did not care about heat. Hull breach count climbed, 1, 3, 7. A standalone line cut across the command feed. Kinetics do not negotiate. Missiles launched next, but not in desperation. In sequence, each. Wave time to the railgun cycle, each detonation forcing Council ships to adjust just enough to expose new vectors. Point defenses flared, intercepting dozens, then hundreds. But saturation was never the goal. Timing was. Seconds to impact? Vethrix asked, though he already knew the answer. 4.2, an officer said. Then 3.9. Then, the next slug erased a carrier's spine. Tonnage readouts spiked as 20 million kilograms of ship ceased to be a single object. The carrier folded, sections drifting apart like discarded thoughts. Council. Doctrine unraveled in real time. Energy weapons demanded distance, elegance, time. Kinetics demanded none of it. Once fired, they simply arrived. Losses? Vethrix asked. Confirmed hull kills at 14, came the reply. Cripples at 26, casualty projections escalating. 67 human ships fired again. The railguns did not roar. They thudded, deep and final, a mechanical heartbeat that marked the end of assumptions. Every 3 seconds, another Council vessel vanished or broke open. Every 3 seconds, the tactical display simplified. Missiles followed through the gaps, targeting drives instead of bridges, disabling, not annihilating. Ships spun, venting atmosphere, weapons offline but hulls intact. Vethrix noticed that pattern too late. They're leaving survivors, he said. Yes, Admiral, an officer replied. Human fire is selective. Another cruiser lost its engines, drifting dead but whole. Escape pods launched. No follow-up fire chased them. A second Stinger line appeared, unbidden and unforgiving, dominance without excess. The hospital ship's counter continued to tick behind the violence. 20,000, 21,556 evacuated. Timestamp 0759. Human. Transmission incoming, an officer said. Vethrix waved it through, mandibles tight. We are engaging your fleet, the human voice said. Calm as before. We are not engaging your crews. Power down weapons and drives, and you will be boarded. Medical assistance will be provided. Railguns fired again, punctuating the offer. Seconds to impact readouts flashed and cleared as Council ships died. Or surrendered. Formations no longer existed, only individual decisions made too late or just in time. Within 90 seconds, the engagement space was littered with wreckage and drifting hulks. 10,000 ships reduced to a field of outcomes. Vethrix stood rigid, watching doctrine collapse under mass and velocity. Energy supremacy, undone by physics older than stars. Behind the human firing line, the hospital ship remained untouched, shields still bright, evacuation clock still running. The humans slowed their fire. Not because they had to. Because the lesson had been delivered, measured in tons, seconds, and silence. The galaxy learned what happened in under 6 minutes. It began. Is a flagged relay, civilian priority, immutable hash, propagating through neutral channels faster than Council sensors could react. Footage stabilized, time codes locked. The hospital ship filled the frame, its markings clear, its registry authenticated by 3 independent archives, a medical vessel, under fire. Admiral Vethrix watched observer markers bloom across the tactical map. 47 systems at first, then more, trade hubs, academic nets, border polities that avoided Council politics until politics found them. The footage did not dramatize. It documented energy lances striking shields, absorption curves flattening, evacuation counters climbing with brutal calm. 20,023,118. 20,023,124. Timestamp 0801. The human transmission ran beneath it, steady as a metronome, citing statutes and coordinates. "You are firing on civilians," the voice said. "This is recorded." Council legal officers flooded the command band, voices overlapping, citations colliding. Vethrix cut them off. Law was a tool, not a restraint. It always had been. But the humans had chosen the frame. On the public feed, the camera shifted inward. Cryobays, surgeons moving with practiced speed, children secured in harnesses rated for combat acceleration. A medic paused, looked directly into the lens, and adjusted a trembling hand before returning to work. A standalone line propagated with the clip. This was illegal. The counter mattered now. Viewers watched it tick while Council fire failed again. And again. The number gave scale to restraint. The absence of human return fire near the hospital ship gave it meaning. Vethrix felt the pressure not as panic, but as erosion. Authority thinned when observed. "Admiral," an aide said quietly, "neutral observers are requesting clarification. They're citing the 12 Accords." "Deny jurisdiction," Vethrix snapped. "Continue operations." Yet operations had already changed. Council ships powered down weapons unbidden, crews aware that surrender would be seen. Others fired. Once more, and were marked, catalogued, their signatures tagged for future reckoning. Human railgun fire did not answer those last shots near the hospital ship. It did not need to. Behind the scenes, human legal packets unfurled across the network. Not manifestos, evidence, chain of custody stamps, sensor logs, weapon yields, casualty projections. The attack reconstructed second by second, so no one could argue later about intent. They were not pleading innocence, they were establishing guilt. Another stinger line spread, quiet and damning. Records outlast fleets. The evacuation crossed a threshold. 20,000, 30,000 civilians clear. The human voice marked it without emphasis. Phase 1 complete. Across the galaxy, reactions crystallized. Insurance syndicates froze Council accounts. Neutral ports denied docking clearance to identified hulls. 2 client states issued statements calling for inquiry. Not condemnation. Inquiry was worse. Vethrix understood the line had been crossed when his own allies went silent. No reassurance, no spin, only distance. "Admiral," an officer said, "human transmissions are offering medical aid to disabled Council crews." Vethrix laughed once, harsh and short. Mercy as leverage, restraint as contrast. The humans were not winning a battle anymore. They were defining a standard. On the public feed, the hospital ship's shields dimmed slightly as power rerouted. Evacuation lanes closed. Medical bays reported green across the board. The human voice returned one last time in this phase, addressed to no one and everyone. "We did not escalate," it said. "We endured. We documented. We protected civilians." The footage kept running, and with it, the understanding spread. This conflict would not be judged by who fired first, but by who crossed the line and who refused to follow. Beyond the hospital ship, human warships held position, weapons silent, waiting for the galaxy to finish watching. Preparation is invisible until it isn't. The first confirmation arrived as a correction, not an announcement. Human command packets updated across the same public channels, now saturated with evidence. They did not boast, they clarified. Redundant fleet groups activated beyond the engagement zone. 3, then 5, then 9 distinct task forces, each positioned along mapped evacuation corridors that had existed long before the Council's first shot. Distances, vectors, fallback nodes, all time-stamped. All pre-registered. This was not reaction, this was rehearsal. Admiral Vethrix watched coalition indicators flicker as Allied fleets requested status updates they had never asked for before. Human data answered them without commentary. Evacuation. Lanes stretching across 12 systems. Civilian traffic routed through hardened corridors shielded by non-combatant law. Medical depots seeded years in advance, each tagged with treaty compliance markers. They had planned for this. Admiral, an aide said carefully, human documentation indicates these contingencies were ratified 8 standard years ago. 8 years. Vethrix felt the weight of it settle. The humans had assumed attack as a probability, not an insult. They had built responses the way others built weapons. Another packet unfolded, legal architecture this time, not laws written in anger. Frameworks. Pre-negotiated trial venues. Evidence standards agreed upon by neutral parties who now realized, too late, why the humans had insisted on them. A stinger line spread through the observer feeds. They expected U.Coalition politics shifted in quiet increments. 2 minor powers withdrew sensor support from Council operations, citing neutrality clauses the humans had helpfully highlighted. A third requested observer status on human vessels. Insurance syndicates updated risk models again. Council hulls were reclassified from stabilizing force to active liability. Vethrix's command band filled with questions he did not answer. On the tactical display, new human fleets did not advance. They held stations along the evacuation corridors, engines warm, weapons cold. Redundancy layered upon redundancy. If one lane failed, 3 more would hold. If one fleet fell, another would step in. Evacuation counts stabilized. Medical ships rotated out, replaced seamlessly by identical hulls already en route. No congestion. No panic. Just flow. The hospital ship at the center of it all powered down to standby, its role complete. Another vessel slid into position without comment, shields already tuned. Human transmission, an officer said. Vethrix did not refuse. This time. Our actions today were not improvised, the human voice said. They were planned to minimize loss of life, yours and ours. We urge all coalition members to disengage. Medical aid remains available. No threat followed. None was needed. Behind the scenes, Council allies recalculated. Aligning with a power that documented everything carried risk. Opposing one that prepared for legality as carefully as combat carried more. A second stinger line appeared, stripped of drama. This is structure. Vethrix felt authority slip not through defeat, but through obsolescence. The Council's strength had always been assumption of inevitability, of moral gravity bending toward power. The humans had replaced assumption with infrastructure. Requests for clarification became requests for mediation. Mediation became distance. Distance became silence. Human fleets remained disciplined, inevitable in a way Vethrix now recognized too late. Not the inevitability of conquest, but of outcome. They had built systems that forced choices to narrow toward restraint or exposure. On the public feeds, analysts stopped asking who would win. They began asking how the Council had missed the preparation signs entirely. Vethrix stared at the layered, human dispositions, at the calm geometry of readiness, and understood the truth beneath the data. This battle had been decided long before today. Today was merely when the galaxy was shown. Silence followed dominance. Not the absence of activity, but the absence of argument. Across the engagement zone, human fleets transitioned from assault posture to containment with mechanical precision. Timers reset, Fire control locks disengaged. New counters appeared, systems secured, hulls disabled, crews recovered. The clock mattered now. 6 hours, start to finish. Admiral Vethrix watched the first system go dark. Not destroyed, neutralized. Council ships powered down drives under human instruction, one by one, transponders shifting from hostile red to inert amber. Boarding craft deployed at measured intervals, never more than 2 per target, never with weapons hot. System 1, an officer reported. 43 hulls surrendered, 5 scuttled before compliance. Casualty rate minimal. Minimal meant something different under human metrics. It meant medics first. It meant pressure seals and atmosphere restored before questions were asked. Human. Fleets moved on. System 2 followed 37 minutes later. Railguns were not fired there. Missiles were not needed. The Council ships had watched the feeds. They had seen the math. Surrender rates jumped to 62% within the first 10 minutes. A standalone line rippled through the observer channels. Resistance is optional. System 3 tried to regroup. A remnant flotilla attempted a breakout maneuver at sublight, drives flaring in desperation. Human response was immediate and final. 3 rail slugs, spaced 3 seconds apart, punched through engines without touching crew compartments. The ship spun, powerless, intact. Seconds to impact had been replaced by seconds to surrender. Losses? Vethrix asked, though the answer had become ritual. Council hull kills at 19 total, came the reply. Cripples at 112, surrenders exceeding 70% in this sector. Human losses were listed beneath, almost an afterthought. 0 hulls lost. Minor damage to 2 escorts. No fatalities reported. By the 3rd hour, the pattern was established. Human fleets entered a system, broadcast terms, waited exactly 90 seconds, then acted. Not brutally, efficiently. Every refusal met a measured response. Every compliance was met with restraint. Another stinger line appeared, quiet and precise. The window closes. System 5 fell without a shot. Crews powered down. Voluntarily, escape pods launching in orderly waves before human boarding craft even arrived. Medical assistants followed them into the void, white-marked ships threading through wreckage with practiced ease. Vethrix felt the 6 hours stretch, each minute erasing another assumption. The Council had ruled through spectacle and fear. Humans ruled through tempo. Admiral, an aide said, voice hollow. Coalition surrender rate is now 81%. 81% meant the war was functionally over. The remaining ships were isolated, scattered, watched by more sensors than they could count. At the 5-hour mark, human fleets paused, not to rest, to tally, numbers finalized, evidence, packages sealed. Prisoner manifests cross-checked against medical intake logs. System 7 was the last. The remaining Council commander refused terms, fired once, missed, and waited. Human response came after the full 90 seconds elapsed. 1 railgun discharge, 1 engine destroyed, 0 casualties. Silence followed. 6 hours after the first containment order, the final system marker shifted to secured. The galaxy-wide, display updated in a single, understated line. Engagement complete. Human ships held position, engines idling, weapons cold. Boarding operations continued at a humane pace. Medics outnumbered soldiers on the manifests. Vethrix stood alone in the guoida, quiet of his command deck, surrounded by readouts that no longer argued with him. The Council fleet had not been annihilated. It had been ended. And in that measured, disciplined silence, the truth settled heavier than any explosion. The humans had not come to punish. They had come to conclude. Triumph never came. What followed was paperwork. Admiral Vethrix stood under guard, human guard, unarmed, weapons slung low, as the terms were transmitted across every secured channel. Not demands, conditions, clear, numbered, finite. All Council personnel are designated detainees, not enemies, the human voice said. You will receive medical treatment. You will receive counsel. You will be tried, not executed, not paraded. Medical ships moved first. White hulls slipped between crippled Council vessels, docking without ceremony. Injured crews were transferred before interrogations began. Pressure suits were cut away. Burns treated. Decompression injuries stabilized. Every action logged, time-stamped, witnessed. A standalone line spread through the feeds. No reprisals. Vethrix watched a wounded captain from a rival council house carried past him on a grav stretcher, alive because humans had disabled engines instead of bridges. The contrast cut deeper than any rail slug. "Admiral Vethrix," a human officer said, voice level. "You are formally charged with violations of interstellar medical law, unlawful targeting of civilians, and command responsibility. You will be transferred to a neutral venue within 18 hours. Vethrix lifted his mandibles. "You could end this now," he said. "The council would fracture without spectacle." The human officer met his gaze. "That's why we won't." Across the galaxy, council authority collapsed, not in flames, but in withdrawals. Member systems suspended participation pending inquiry. Financial backers froze assets under legal advisement. Archives once sealed were opened by council clerks suddenly, eager to cooperate. Justice moved faster than fear ever had. Human trial frameworks activated as promised. Neutral observers appointed. Evidence packets released in phases, sensor logs, communications, weapon telemetry. Each piece already validated months, even years before today. There would be no debates about authenticity, only responsibility. Another. Stinger line surfaced, spare and unavoidable. Mercy follows control. Human fleets did not occupy council space. They did not raise flags. They did not rename systems. They withdrew to perimeter stations, maintaining security corridors, while governance questions were left to civilians and courts. The hospital ships remained, rotating through affected systems to treat those caught in the collapse. The same evacuation protocols that had saved human civilians now stabilized former enemies. Vethrix felt the final blow when his own aides stopped asking for orders. Not because they were dead, because authority had moved elsewhere, into documents, hearings, schedules that did not include him. "You're dismantling us," he said quietly. The human officer shook his head. "You dismantled yourselves. We're just making sure it's recorded correctly." As Vethrix was escorted toward transfer, he passed a display showing the final tally. Civilian casualties, 0 from the hospital ship. Council crew fatalities. Limited, documented, unavoidable under engagement rules. Prisoners accounted for. Medical outcomes pending. No victory music played. No speeches followed. Human fleets powered down to standby, weapons safed, logs archived. The galaxy adjusted to the absence of a force it had mistaken for permanence. Vethrix understood then that spectacle had always been the Council's weakness. It demanded fear to function. The humans required only process. And process, once begun, did not need triumph to finish its work. Engines hummed at idle. Human fleets rotated slowly through the void, shields engaged but weapons cold. 6 hours of engagement had concluded. Hospital ships had returned to standard rotations. Boarding operations were complete. Evidence packages archived. The galaxy had been observed, catalogued, and educated. Admiral Kalen of the Terran Command felt no elation, not victory, not triumph, only the quiet rhythm of procedure and awareness. The Council fleet was neutralized, survivors stabilized, evacuation lanes secure. Civilian counts tallied, 20,000, 35,782, timestamps 0829 through 0835, complete. Metrics satisfied, checks verified, then the sensors pinged something else. At first it was a faint distortion, easily dismissed, a shadow in long-range gravimetric readings beyond the outer rim. 32 light-years from the nearest, known system. Its signal was irregular, but the energy signature was massive, incomprehensible by standard galactic measures. The object, or fleet, was neither human nor council. It did not respond to hails. It did not broadcast at all. Kalen leaned over the display, tracing the anomaly's vector. The movement was deliberate, calculated. Acceleration readings defied expectation. Slow enough to suggest caution, fast enough to suggest intent. Every standard algorithm flagged it as unknown, but each flag compounded the sense of urgency. A junior officer spoke quietly. "Sir, extrapolated. Trajectory intersects multiple inhabited systems within 21 standard days." Kalen nodded. "Not an engagement, not yet. Observation only. Track, log, prepare contingencies." Across the fleet, sensors updated in real time. Fleets recalculated formations to accommodate the unknown. Evacuation corridors were checked again. Hospitals shifted standby protocols. Command grids adjusted. Redundant systems engaged. Humanity's disciplined inevitability did not pause, but it did focus. A standalone line appeared on the display, unprompted. The Rim watches. Intelligence packets assembled. Long-range scanners synchronized. Unknown variables coded into fleet. AI layered against every contingency developed over centuries, every probability considered, every escape route prepped. And still, the signal persisted. Massive, silent, unclassified. Kalen considered the lessons of the last engagement. Absorption, acceleration, restraint, redundancy. Each tactic, each measure, had prepared humanity to dominate one threat. But the Rim was outside precedent. The strategies that worked against the Council were starting points, not solutions. A stinger line flashed quietly across the main feed. History has no pattern. Commanders issued orders in short, precise bursts. Fleets spread along peripheral nodes. Sensor arrays extended. Civilian evacuation grids expanded preemptively. No panicked speeches. No reckless deployment. Just procedure amplified by preparation. Humanity would observe. Humanity would record. Humanity would survive. The Outer Rim anomaly continued moving, indifferent to fleets, indifferent to law, indifferent to anything known. It was a shadow, larger than memory, ancient in scale, and utterly silent in intent. Kalen felt the familiar clarity. The Council had been a problem to end, measurable and manipulable. This was different, unquantified, unforgiving. Yet the response remained calm, surgical, unshakable. Every ship, every fleet, every algorithm operated with kinetic discipline and moral clarity. The galaxy might panic, humanity would not. The hospital ship rotated, medical bays active, civilians stabilized. War had ended. Procedure continued. And beyond the Rim, sensors logged the first tangible whispers of what awaited. Engines hummed, fleets held formation, preparations scaled outward. The horizon was no longer a line. It was a question, and humanity turned toward it.